This old guy DIY video has to do with helping a friend with a 2014 25 horse Mercury outboard EFI 4-stroke. And the thing would start and idle, but if you tried to put it in gear, it would die. And then when he did get it to run a little bit, he'd be going 3,000 RPMs, it would drop down to 2,000 RPMs and then die again. So what I found is we have 2 known problems and 1 suspected problem we addressed in this adventure. So it looks like the most critical thing was right here where this pickup tube comes up to the fitting. There was air getting in here. So when this thing sits in the tank, you know, it might only have half of the tube covered. This is exposed to air, so it was sucking air instead of fuel, and that was starving the engine. So what I did here is put a hose clamp on it, and based on the testing I just did, the hose clamp resolved that issue. The second thing we had was his old hose that was 15 years old had deteriorated, so when I pulled the fittings off the end, you could see that plastic lining basically just looked like boogers, and that was restricting the flow. So we replaced that. And the third thing was the vapor recovery system. I read about that online. I didn't know anything about it until the other day. I loosened the drain plug on that. We got a bunch of liquid out that looked and felt and smelled more like water than fuel. And after doing all those things, the motor runs now. So we'll put her back together, and this is it. So here we are with the 2014 Mercury 25 EFI. This thing is purring like a kitten. It has all the fuel at once, and it's happy. Over the last few days, I've been helping a friend troubleshoot his problem with fuel starvation on his Mercury 25 horse outboard. And one thing I found is when I removed this fuel pickup unit from the tank, this thing is actually a 3-piece unit. It has the filter on the bottom, then it has this kind of yellow tube, and when I pulled it out of the tank, this joint where the tube meets this little fitting basically fell apart in my hand. So I suspect initially it was glued together, but over 20 years of being out in the sun and living life in ethanol, that joint had failed. So when he would try to pump up the bulb, he could not get a good vacuum because he was drawing air through here. If the fuel level was down, say the tank was 3/4 full, the fuel level was where my fingers are. As he would pump on the bulb, air would be sucked in between this tube and that fitting, so that defeated the purpose of the whole thing. So I'm working through this right now, getting everything straightened out. Last night I glued this with some E6000 product, and I'll be testing it in just a few minutes in water to see that it's airtight. This is the fitting that mated with that part. And if you look in there, you can see that little plunger, effectively a spring-loaded valve on the right-hand side, is stuck in the down position. So I'll work on that in a few minutes and try to break that loose so it functions like it should. I suspect it's just gummed up with dried ethanol. And this is what the piece for the other end looks like. And if I push on that thing, it goes in and out as it should, a little spring-loaded valve. Now to test the unit, I've just taken it and put it in a little container of water here where I can see everything. Now when I pump the bulb, the water gets drawn up nicely. I have water coming out that end. I'm going to stop pumping, put my finger over the end and see if any air bubbles come in. So you can see air bubbles coming in here. So you can see the air bubble there. So there's a leak. Air is getting in somewhere up here in this unit. So the thing's 20 years old. I think it's time to just replace that unit and then we'll be able to move forward. I went to the barn and found a similar tank. It's another Mercury tank with the same fitting. So I'm going to remove the 4 screws here, take this pickup unit out, and we'll see how it looks compared to the other one. This one has the same pickup tube arrangement, and there is no adhesive here. I can turn that tube. So maybe my initial assessment was wrong. In an effort to eliminate the leak path, I'm going to put a hose clamp right where that tube and the body meet. Now with the hose clamp in place, I'll put it in my little water container and see if I get air bubbles again. For the sake of my testing, I'm just using a container of water. Now that I have that clamp on there, based on what I just saw, I've eliminated the air path. We'll put this thing in the water, simulating being in the fuel tank on the boat. Come down here to the bulb. Only takes 4 pumps and it's solid. Now there's water coming out. We look here, no air bubbles. It's sucking the container dry just like it should. So it looks like the root cause of the problem was an air leak right here. 20-year-old tube came up to the fitting that then goes to the fuel line. And it's just drawing it down like nothing. We should have the boat running here shortly. When it came to the troubleshooting, I pulled the fuel filter off, and after taking this off, the filter itself looked beautiful, so that wasn't the problem. This is the vapor recovery system, and this is the plug that you open up to allow whatever liquid is in there to drain. So if there was ethanol or water separated out from last year, that stuff will sit beneath the level of the gas. So by opening this and allowing the liquid to drain out, then to recharge the system, you just come over to your ball, squeeze that thing, you'll pressurize the system, and then the fuel in here is what allows this thing to start when it has little or no gas coming from the tank.